The year is 2025, and we are looking at potentially welcoming three of the most interesting indie skateboarding games ever released, and in such close proximity. Those being the recently released Hellskate, Mr. Thieves, Ollie Frog Toad Skater, and Skate Story, which nearly a year ago got picked up by Devolver of all companies. Worth noting that we're also eagerly awaiting any more info, update, or news about the upcoming Skate 4. And well, while scripting this video, Tony Hawk went ahead and announced 3 and 4 will be getting remade just like THPS 1 and 2. Thanks, Birdman. So it goes without saying then, this is an amazing time to be a fan of skateboarding games. 2025 is shaping up to be the year of skating games, and we're thrilled about that. But just for a moment, I want to take us back a few years to highlight another game, way back in the super faraway time of 2019. Or really, for me personally, it was 2020 when I got a chance to try Session Skate Sim. This was also the first time I had an opportunity to return to the annual PAX East in Boston, and with both Two Stupid Gamers in attendance, we worked our butts off, filming the entire time. One of those things we filmed was an interview with Sam Eng, who was showing off Skate Story, a phenomenal looking skateboarding game that takes the idea you have, the one that's preconceived in your brain box compartment, of what makes a skateboarding game and completely shatters it. But now the funny thing is, that wasn't even the only skateboarding game being demoed at that event. Over the weekend, attendees were also able to check out Skater XL from Easy Day Studios. So there were at least 3 skateboarding games at PAX that year. And this was welcome after many years of not a whole lot going on for the genre as a whole. But I digress. While I can't say much about Skater XL, let me tell you, Session became my life for a good month, and I'm here to talk about that. First off, holding the controller in my hand and having the dev walk me through the nuances of what makes this skateboarding game unique, I noticed Session has a very off-putting control scheme. The way that the analog sticks are used per foot seems overly complicated. But to be honest, it makes complete sense for the sheer fact that this is marketed as a simulator and not just a game. In the same way us race sim people will want every last detail of the experience of driving a car translated into a collection of $500 peripherals bolted to a rig, what Session is trying to accomplish is give you the most realistic feeling for a skateboarding game that is achievable through a standard handheld gaming controller. And it works. Damned be the EA Skate layout. This is the way skateboarding games should be controlled. Once you get used to this approach of skating gameplay, you're gonna have a hard time going back to anything else. Now, it's important to note that by this point, Session has had a few updates, including several DLC packs. They even got professional skater Chris Cole to jump on board for this game, joining the other pros whose likeness were already featured in this game. Right now, it seems that Dev isn't really doing anything else with Session to make way for an upcoming project, which is kind of a shame. There could definitely be a lot more content. One of the biggest hurdles new players will face, besides the unique control scheme, is the fact that there isn't a whole lot of maps to explore in the base game. At times, you could argue that Session comes across as a very bare bones experience. The levels featured are cool, however, you really only get a couple of major areas, despite the map select screen looking like one giant list. Yeah, some of these are actually just different warp points on the same map, not individual levels. This leaves a lot to be desired, and buying the DLC is a must in my opinion, just to freshen up the variety. Still, even before the DLC, even for the fact that there isn't a whole lot out of the box, the fact is I found myself sinking dozens of hours into Session within a week of getting my PS5. What I will say is a good amount of detail was added to the included levels, especially the real-life locations, by which I mean actual skate parks and skate spots that skaters go to do their thing. You have FDR Skate Park, Love Park, the Pyramid Ledges, LES Coleman, the Brooklyn Banks, just to name a few. I love being able to, from the comfort of home, experience these places that I've skated in the past, and several I would have wanted to, but didn't. And although yes, I wish that some of the levels, including LES Coleman, was connected with other parts of the world to really give me that immersion of being a carefree New York City skater, skating around the Big Apple from place to place, reliving my glory days as a young skater, I could still totally immerse myself in the levels that do connect by just rolling from one spot to the next. But moving on, Session is so much more than a sandbox that you can freely skate around in. What Creature Studios was able to accomplish is the most realistic feeling skating you can play on a controller. Previously, I would have said that about the EA Skate series. You can even be forgiven for feeling that it's very similar to Skate. However, Session takes further what Skate initially set out to do. By separating each foot by analog stick, it emphasizes the importance each plays in the whole ordeal of skating. While in front-facing regular stance, your left foot is going to be the foot that finishes the ollie or does the majority of your flips, while the right foot times the pop. Utilizing both analog sticks in this way allows the player to engage with each movement, every step, if you will, of every single trick or maneuver. No important component of tricking is left out of the player's control, and it's this breaking down the act of doing a kickflip in a video game to a one-to-one experience that makes me believe we have reached the pinnacle of immersive, controller-based skateboarding games. To drive this point home, I would compare it to the genre of fighting games. You have your Smash Bros. Games where you push a button in one single direction and it does a predetermined move, with up to 4 moves per button. Then you have something like Street Fighter, where you have more complicated inputs like quarter circles, half circles, and Shoryuken motions, in addition to a light, medium, and heavy attack for both your kicks and punches. Well, now take that even further and consider the Tekken series. In Tekken, you have a dedicated input for each arm and each leg, and that's kind of like the progression we see leading up to Session. By individualizing the analog sticks, similar to what we get with Tekken, nothing is missed between the player's input and what the character model is doing. In the interest of time, I'm not going to give you all a tutorial on how to skateboard so you can see it for yourself, but let me list some key aspects of the gameplay that, in my mind, captures the essence of going out and skating. First up is number 4, the obsessive perfectionism of trying to get the trick exactly the way you want it. The quintessential component that drives people to keep skating is learning to do something really special with your board. Something that most people will be in awe of just by seeing it in real time. And part of that boils down to doing a trick and wanting it to look a certain way. It's not just about getting the frontside flip down to 10 stair, it's making sure it was clean and you roll away from it the right way. You can ask our buddy Frank about that time he watched me attempt the same obstacle for 2 hours before I finally got it close enough to what I wanted, and even then, I still felt like I could keep going and get it a lot better. Because Session is such a grounded feeling skateboarding game, because it's more of a sim than anything else in this genre, when the player does tricks, it has this same struggling towards perfection element. You're not flying around a school or warehouse pulling off 900,000 point combos one after another, which is all well and good if that's what you want, but for the sake of a more natural experience, instead, with Session you find a spot, think of what you like to do there, think of which trick would feel best, and then you session it, using the in-game retry from spot function till you land a trick exactly the way you want. This concept is what they base this game around. Skateboarding is all about sessioning, doing the same trick ad nauseum, and sometimes for hours and hours, before realizing it's already past midnight. My third point is going to be a little bit harder to describe, but when coming up to an obstacle like a ramp or a ledge, the act of doing a trick really captures the real-life experience where your back foot is kind of in a blind spot. Again, stay with me here, I'm going to do my best to summarize. Let's say, for instance, you need to do an ordinary nollie, which is an ollie but in reverse using your nose instead of your tail, to a tail slide onto a ledge. Unless you glue your focus onto your back foot, which would probably impede you from being able to start the trick in the first place, the connection between the back foot and back of the skateboard with the ledge is kind of a guess. You're just throwing your back foot 90 degrees and the tail of the skateboard towards the ledge and hoping for the best because you can't see it 100% without disrupting your attention elsewhere. Typically, when skateboarding, you look forward and down, not backwards, so it would make it harder to keep your eyes on your back foot the whole way through. A lot of the grinds in Session, or just trying to land in a very specific place, felt just like the real thing to me. Despite that I was skating in the virtual world, I felt the sometimes futility of hoping your foot and board go where they need to, but never knowing for certain if they will. And just like with real skateboarding, over time this feeling improves, letting you hit the mark more often. For number 2, we have cruising, another big one. Cruising is also a really big part of the overall realism of Session. Like I said, there are some parts of the map that could benefit from being linked like a big open sandbox. These are usually the skate parks, which I still enjoy going to, but outside of that, there is a good amount of exploration here, with tons of connectivity between spots. For these maps, when combined with the way physics work, how textured and realistic the graphics are, the sound design, and the speed at which players can move between skate spots, cruising around the streets of New York, Philly, or San Francisco feels authentically gritty, fast, and nomadic like it's supposed to. Part of why I was able to already sink so many hours into Session was because there's no better feeling of going out skating after work, and this gives you the best feeling skateboarding experience you can get with the convenience of playing a video game. And finally, for number 1, we have to talk about filming. Although navigating the menu for the filming mode was a little tricky to figure out, the game does this aspect solidly. Filming is heavily intertwined with another very big part of skateboarding, and that's stacking clips. As a skater, you don't want to just land cool tricks, you want the world to see it, so you gotta go out and film it. With the filming mode, you can change between all sorts of different angles, perspectives, distances, film from a fisheye lens following the skater, or a stationary focused angle from afar. They really included solid options to film your stunts and bloopers, which I have to say, the temptation to mess around with this feature for hours on end is hard to overcome for me. Session was able to tap into a skater's desire to capture skating on film and analyze and preserve it. And as a side note, how cool would this be if this ends up getting a lot of players into videography just like IRL skateboarding did with me? Session is packed full of immersive skateboarding experience. Take it from a real, albeit former skater. But there are some other things I need to address. For instance, when the realism falters, it can falter pretty spectacularly. The physics can be jank sometimes, with moves not coming out clean or how they're supposed to, and even sometimes the ticker doesn't register what you did correctly, if at all. I experienced some of the worst issues on kinked rails, which were hard to consistently do the same trick all the way through, and it just ends up looking bizarre. You could see going down the kinked rail, your skater starts in one grind, but after the kink, that is the middle portion where the angle of the rail changes, the game launches the skater back into the air, at which point the grind is reset. Grinding a kinked rail wouldn't function like this in the real world. Because of the skater's weight pulled by gravity, the trucks of the board/deck are locked into the rail, maintaining contact all the way down. Where the immersion also breaks is Session's relationship with ragdolling. The skater will ragdoll at the slightest thing, which can be authentic at times, but first off, it has the typical gaming ragdoll effect where player models just crumple. This looks nothing like the way a real skater slides across the pavement. And sometimes it gets really annoying because the ragdolling is set off way too easily, and the skater planks out just by rolling over something that wouldn't knock you down IRL. Yes, skateboarders and pebbles don't mix. It's taken the souls of many skaters in the past. But there are times when, like, a tiny break or dip in the sidewalk sends our guy to the next universe. Like, come on. Unless your wheels are 10mm, the skateboard should roll over that without much problem. But with some of Session's cons in mind, I'm still forgiving. According to their website, this is just Creature's first game. Looking at their LinkedIn page, you can even see that this seems to be a pretty small team. We get that. We're a small team of creators too. And understand that at this level, everything can't be perfect. The resources just aren't there. It's just not possible. And, well, I'm so impressed with the skating in Session overall and what options they give you, plus the good attention to detail, that these criticisms, while valid, don't ruin the whole deal for me. This isn't your typical skateboarding game. This isn't pick up and go be a pro skater, let's blast real big fish while we jump off a rooftop doing 10 backflips. Because it feels so much more grounded. We're laser focused on what real skateboarding is like, rather than all of that other over-the-top stuff. Session is a skateboarding simulator, and I would argue the first of its kind. They literally pioneered a genre with this one for the pure fact that although other skateboarding games are really good in their own right, nothing up to this point has been like Session because this isn't a game, it's a skateboarding simulator, one that you can play with just your handheld controller. Now, I do feel the need to mention that I haven't finished the main missions in this game, so I can't speak to that. Hell, I've barely touched them. They were okay, but since there aren't any fully animated cutscenes or voice acting, it can come off as a little dull. But that didn't faze me, because like most simulators, I'm really here for the immersion, and don't always need structured objectives to make good use of my time. Honestly, simulators aren't really games, they're tools for translating real experiences to the virtual world. Despite my nitpicking, I hope all of you give Session a chance. No, I mean really give it a chance. Don't just pick it up and leave in frustration because the controls have a learning curve. Once you can prime yourself to play this with the controls the way they are, and lose yourself to an immersive skateboarding experience, you will have a hard time putting the controller down. Which is why in my experience, this became my preferred way to play a skateboarding game. And if Creature is watching this, hey, you folks put together a truly one-of-a-kind indie title. There's literally nothing out there that comes closer to the feeling of skateboarding to date, and that is something to be proud of. And that is gonna do it for another Two Stupid Gamers quick scope. We haven't done one of these in a while. I just played the crap out of Session and I really wanted to talk about it, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, what did you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. We're always curious to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like skating games. We'll definitely be featuring a couple of skating games throughout the rest of the year. And yeah, stay tuned for more awesome content. I'm Mash the Stampede for Two Stupid Gamers. We'll see you next time.